Namaskar. Hello and welcome to 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪𝙥 channel. I'm your host Shri Iyer. As the presidential races approach, we're still a few months away, in fact a year and a few months away, but the field is getting crowded. A lot of people are jumping in. A lot of people are already there. What are their positions? Many are Indian Americans, but do they have the back of Sanatanis? How truthful are they when it comes to a situation where they need to have the Hindus back? We are going to find out that from our conversation with our guest today, Yogi Chugh. He is no stranger to us. Yogi has been on our channel, very erudite, very articulate, and he has known all these people for several years now. And he promised me that this is going to be a no-holds-barred conversation. So let's welcome Yogi. Yogi, namaskar and welcome to 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪𝙥 channel.
Namaskar, how are you?
I'm doing well, Yogi. Thank you so much. And I'm going to start with showing you a small slide deck. Just 1 minute as we riffle through all the different people who say that they are Indian Americans in origin. Let's go through the video, please. There's one slide that got missed out. At the very end, I had one more, Harmeet Dhillon. I don't know why that missed out. There you go. So as you can see here, guys, all those names with a blue band against the name. Can you put up Harmeet's slide again, please? Slide deck. Thank you. Go to the end. Yeah. See the band behind her name? That is red. She's a Republican. Go to the previous one. There it is. It's blue. All those with a blue band are Democrats. And you may be surprised to know that Ritesh Tandon, who actually ran on a Republican ticket, is for 2024 running on a Democratic ticket. Unless he changes his mind, Yogi can set me straight here. So Yogi, this is the list of Indian Americans who are active in Congress, or some of them are trying to get into Congress. And we have not even gone to the next level where there's a whole bunch of other people also coming up. But the most important thing here is when push comes to shove, how many of them have the back of Sanatanis? That's the question I want you to keep at the back of your mind as we go through all these candidates. Let's start with the current Vice President, Kamala Harris. Now,
absolutely. We'll definitely talk about every one of these candidates. But Shri, just before we start the conversation, can you preface what a Sanatani means?
A Sanatani is a Hindu and somebody who practices Hindutva. Hindutva, Sanatani, Sanatana Dharma follower, they all mean the same. People don't seem to conflate these things. They are all the same. Hindutva, Tva means Hindu-ness. Being Hindu, practicing Hindu. There is no direct translation from a Sanskrit word to an English word. Hindutva means Hindu-ness, being a Hindu. So somebody tries to split Hindu and Hindutva, somebody doesn't know what that means. So I think I need to at least lay this thing straight out, saying that any of all these things mean one and the same. Because some people say, oh, you cannot be a follower of Sanatana Dharma, as if that is toxic. People are ignorant. And anyone who has any questions, please feel to reach out to me and I'll set you straight on what this means. I have lived half my life in the United States, but I know enough Dharma to explain to you where you are going wrong. Anyway, that's just a matter for other people. Yogi, go ahead. I hope I explained to you.
Sure. Thank you for providing that clarification context. I think most Indian Americans living in the United States will profess that they pursue a faith of Hinduism in this nation. I think that's first and foremost when it comes down to that definition. So thank you for clarifying your position. But I think from the perspective of candidates in the United States, I think most candidates will identify themselves as a Hindu and profess Hinduism. You can then have some candidates talking about the fact that I'm a Gandhian who believes in Hinduism, the plurality of civilizations that comes with that. So from that regard, Kamala Harris currently has had a stellar political career right from the moment when she was the district attorney in San Francisco, then went on to run for attorney general, ran a presidential campaign. Midway into the primary, she did step out of the race. And many say that the support that she gave President Biden at that moment in time to win in South Carolina was a defining moment in the presidential campaign. And subsequent to that, when it comes to the United States of government, where a president is winning the nomination, he selects a vice president, then the president and the vice president run as a ticket. And in this case, it was the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris over these years has been somebody who has forged a great political career. Her faith has been something that I think has been profoundly deep and a personal choice for her. And when she did run for the presidency, I think the conversation did center around her being African American, but at the same time, from her mom's side, she did talk about the joyous events, celebrations in her life that she had. And she said that her life was defined by the teachings of her mother. And from that regard, Kamala Harris was probably historic in the fact that, a self-identified Hindu American, even if it's half from her mother's side, her father, I believe, was African American. And from that context, she did help elevate the choice of a potential of a first American, president of this nation who has the chance to be profound enough to come back and say she's been defined by a Hindu faith. So from that regard, I think her political trajectory has been one in which she's been very proud of her faith, but she hasn't put her faith front and center, which I think in American politics, when you're dealing with a multi-generational, multi-religious coalition of voters, your faith defines who you are, but your faith cannot be the only thing that puts you front and center in your political advocacy or your legislation that you have to deal with, no matter what office you're running from.
Yogi, I have a question for you. One way to understand what they believe in is what they take their oath on. Kamala Harris took her oath on 2 Bibles. I did not see any Gita or anything referring to Hinduism there, my friend.
No, I totally understand that. But, the tradition of oath in Congress, or at least in any office, has been on the Bible. One of the clearest things is that a nation that was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, the Bible has typically been the norm by which people have taken an oath. Will the world change in the future, and will people start to bring in their scriptures or their books from a previous country that they were born or raised in? Maybe, but Kamala Harris was born in the United States of America. I don't think she's of Indian descent. So from that regard, to take an oath on the Bible, which has been the practice in America, just imagine this whole scenario if somebody got elected in India and they chose to come back and say, I'll take an oath on the Bible. It's certainly one of those misnomers that would want to come back and say, okay, what are you doing? So I think traditions in government
Yogi, if you are a Christian Indian and you can take oath on the Bible. If you are a Muslim Indian politician, you can take oath on the Quran or on the Granth Sahib in India, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Good for that.
This is where I find it very odd when Americans are trying to point fingers at the fate of minorities in India when they need to first look inward themselves. Go ahead, please.
I don't think anybody's picking on India, at least in the United States government or the State Department. Certainly we can have the conversation about that. But, I think the question simply comes down to normalizing our faith in this country. And certainly I think that as the Indian American immigrant story becomes a little bit more profound in the influence of our scriptures, I think what you're going to find is most candidates are going to come back and take an oath on the Bible. I think that most people will start maybe in the future take an oath on the Constitution. But to the point about America coming back and having candidates take an oath on their scriptural books, may be coming, but I don't think it's normal. The only person I can think of, at least in American politics, the person who took an oath on the Bhagavad Gita, I believe, was 𝙒𝙗𝘅 Gabbard. Certainly, I believe there may be a couple of other candidates as well. But today, as you get sworn in as a member of Congress, or you get sworn in as an assembly member, or you get sworn in, I believe that people are taking an oath on the Bible. Now, what I am also seeing, though, Shri, to your point, a lot of candidates are taking an oath on the Bible, because that's typically how it happens. The Speaker of the House will swear you in, but family members will hold on to the book that inspires them, and will hold them in their hands. I've seen numerous candidates whose wives or mothers or parents were joining that moment or holding a Bhagavad Gita in their hand. But I don't think it's been normalized yet to the point, Shri. Will this happen in the next 10, 20 years? Potentially. But today, I think it's one of those things where a candidate who's getting elected to office probably wants to come back and say, my faith is deep rooted in who I am, but at the same moment in time, I'm going to follow the norms of this nation. That could change in the future. But for now, I think the oath in the Bible is what most candidates will probably willingly do.
So before we move on to the next candidate, does she have my back? I am a proud Sanatani.
I think Kamala Harris is the vice president of this country. She represents the entire country. Does she believe in her faith? I believe she does. But obviously, from that regard, one has to remember that politics is stigmatized to the very idea of the nation that you serve. She's the vice president of the United States of America. For Christ's sake, I think she has to come back and ensure that every American feels that she's watching out for their interest. But on the other hand, though, I do believe that if there were ever an attack on the Hindu faith in the United States, she would come back and defend that, as many people have in the past. When there have been articles in CNN or articles on any TV channel where somebody has condemned a Hindu American candidate, I think there are many people who've come to the defense and said, this is wrong, this is un-American.
You've known her personally, and I've kind of known the family. My belief is she's more, she has sort of shed a little bit of that background or culture of hers when she became or started running for president. Personally, I think she's much more than what she's made to look out like. So in terms of her future, where do you see her? Do you think she will be the running mate for Joe Biden, or will Joe Biden consider somebody else as his running mate going into 2024 election? And then we'll go on to the next candidate.
I think Vice President Kamala Harris is secure. I do not believe at this moment in time there's even a conversation about replacing her. I think she stays on the ticket. Down the future, what does she run for? I believe she'll have an advantage as the first woman running for president, African American, and having a belief in the fact that her mom's side of the family perpetuated her Hindu belief in her way of life. I think definitely she is a strong contender in the future. Will she become president? The American voters will decide. She does have a work cut out, though. With people in America today, there are a lot of people who support her. There's a group of supporters that will stand to her defense and just absolutely advocate for that. And push comes to shove, I think the Indian American vote at the end will definitely root for her, because in spite of the issues that they may pursue or the lack of, I believe the Indian American vote always goes for those that they consider their own.
Well, viewers, you can see that when I showed you that slide deck, except for Harmeet Dhillon, everybody else is a Democrat. So Indian Americans are very, very solid Democrat. Although recent events might make them rethink their vote, we'll have to see how much of a shift there is in their vote in the 2024 elections. Now let's go on to the next candidate, Khanna. You've known him well for many years, and I just did an interview for which I received both bouquets and brickbats, and that's a good job, because I think I did a good job, and both sides are taking pot shots at me. That's fine. The thing that I wanted to ask Yogi, is that Ro has been sort of like straddling, you can say, sitting on the fence on some things, where he tries to be all things to all people. That's how I've seen it. At the same time, he has a body of work that shows that he has actually supported India on various initiatives. Where do you think Ro is headed? Do you think he might be headed for like the Senate? Dianne Feinstein is 91. He was one of the few Democrats who took direct aim at her and said, it's time for you to retire. Where do you think Ro is headed?
Before I answer that question, Shri, I want to make one statement. Obviously, you have viewers both in the United States and you have viewers in India as well. Politics is local. It's always local. You cater to a local audience. And your district. In the United States form of government, as a member of Congress, you represent a constituency, you represent a district. Roe represents Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is probably one of the most diverse districts in the world. It's one of the districts which has even been referred to as a district that is API specific. What that means is people of Asian descent, Chinese Americans, Indian Americans, people from the entire subcontinent. It is one of the most diverse nations in the world. So from that aspect, Roe won in a district, which is certainly one of the most diverse districts. So obviously he professes that his faith is that of being Hinduism. That's the belief that he has. And then from that regard, he's been able to build a coalition of many people. And from that regard, every decision that he makes, and for that matter, any member of Congress would have to ensure that he's representing the interests of the entire district. If he were to focus on being a singular focus and a singular ethnic community as a part of that district, one would call that political malpractice. So clearly, when you said straddle, I think the word straddle is just right, because as a United States member of Congress, he has to focus on the issues that he was elected for. And when he's elected for those issues are, let's ensure that Silicon Valley continues to thrive. Let's focus on the fact that he addresses the questions of income inequality. He ran on a mandate of no wars and cutting down the expenditure of the Defense Department on the military industrial complex and the budget. He's been somebody who is a progressive, and the best way to describe that progressive is that he believes in certain issues. He does believe in the multiracial, multi-generational concept of building coalitions. And from that, he's been effective, because not only has he been able to become the campaign co-chairman of a Bernie Sanders campaign that did remarkably well in California. And then he's also been able to be a centrist on economic policy. On your program, we talked about progressive capitalism. So he's been able to be the bridge between the progressive causes, which are very profoundly popular in California, along with the centrist policies to become that bridge. And that's one of the reasons why he's become effective in this idea about his religious identity. I think, he's often said that I am somebody who believes in my faith. I believe in its profound impact in the world. He's been defined by Gandhi, as you know, has been a singular influence in his life. And Roe also, I believe, Congressman Khanna also believes that public service can do good. It's remarkable how in a world of dissent, of differing viewpoints from constituencies in his own district, he's been able to keep most people happy, if not all, and he's become effective. And I think he's betting his political career on two things. One, I believe he believes strongly in the issue of income inequality and how congressional legislation needs to deal with that issue. But on the other issue, he's forging a path on the Armed Services Committee, which puts him in an inevitable position to recognize that there's a hegemony of China that America has to put a check on. And the best partner in the region today is the US-India partnership. So I believe Congressman Roe Khanna is probably the one person who's going to put his entire political career on obviously working on the progressive issues such as income inequality, college education, minimum wage, uplifting a middle class, on the climate. And then also I think that he believes that the United States-India partnership is going to be one of the most consequential partnerships of the 21st century. He's only, amongst all of the Indian American candidates or people that are in office today, he's probably the only one that's born in the United States. So as a US citizen, I think the potential for higher office are probably much more for Congressman Roe Khanna than many of the other candidates who were not born in the United States.
Yogi, you've kind of not answered my question. Is he planning a run for Senate? The reason I'm asking that question, I'll explain to you why. See, the road to a president job, let's say that Roe has ambitions to become the president of the United States, because you hinted on that he's American born. So that takes either you become a governor of a state and then you run for president, or you become a senator and you run for president. Rarely. I mean, there are instances where a congressman has actually run for president. I'm not sure they succeeded, though. Your thoughts on that?
No, I totally understand your question. It's a very valid question. So let's talk about the Senate for a moment. Ro had the opportunity to run for a Senate seat. He chose not to run for the Senate seat, in which today you have Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee running for the Senate. Ro has endorsed Congresswoman Barbara Lee to be a senator, but I think they both share their values on the issue about income inequality. They share the same vision about endless wars and the need to ensure that America is very diligent when it goes to wars, right? So that's clearly that regard. So Ro decided not to run for the Senate, and I believe he thinks that Silicon Valley is probably one of the most consequential districts in the nation. Silicon Valley, tech, it's an opportunity to come back and take the message of Silicon Valley success to the hinterland all over the United States, uplift a new generation of people who are being left behind. So from that regard, I think the politics of the past was that you had to be a governor or you had to be a senator. I think times are changing. I think the ability to run a spirited campaign from a district that is as consequential as Silicon Valley. California sometimes is seen as the state that is perceived as equal to many countries in the world based upon its GDP. Now, will Ro run for higher office in the future? I believe that the opportunity should always be there for any candidate with any ambition. But I think for the present moment, he's so focused on Silicon Valley because Silicon Valley can lead on so many things. Shri, you and I have talked often about the impact of what we can do for Silicon Valley. Can you imagine in a world in which communities are being shuttered because of manufacturing gone overseas? On regards to the climate, can you see how many coal factories are being shut down in our country today in the sake for creating a climate just world? We are now shuttering factories down, but what happens about ecosystems and communities? I think Ro's position of a member of Congress who's been able to lead a Bernie Sanders campaign as its campaign co-chairman, having held on to the progressive mantle, taking it forward on his economic patriotism message that he often talks about, forging a coalition with centrists like Biden to get him elected, and taking the message of Bidenomics in the economy and bring manufacturing back, enables him to elevate himself on a national stage on the issues. And I believe that while he still has many years to go ahead in politics, I think he's probably the one person who's well positioned because of his ability to forge coalitions along the way. I know that the question is a long-worded answer, Shri, but to understand American politics, one has to see that who has this ability to bring front and center the issues. Government has finally become a meritocracy. You and I have talked about this. One of Vivek's reasons for success is he's intelligent, he's smart, he's inserting issues that are at the forefront of the Republican primary. So I don't hold to the premise of the past. I think with TV and the ability to define yourself on media, news channels, and alternative media, and traveling the country with your message enables you to build name ID, which when the choice comes about who do you pick to be successful in a primary run, I believe Ro has positioned himself well in spite of some of the limitations that he may have. And he's said this, I'm not perfect, he's fallible, right? As most politicians should acknowledge that they are at some given moment in time.
One thing I have to admit that while he says that he's progressive, he's more of a progressive moderate. There have been some things where he has taken a more moderate position. See, governance is almost always about how close to center you are. You have to move to the center because you have to be inclusive, like you said. Let's say, you go on to become vice president or president, you have to be more towards the center. You can't be to one end or the other. You've seen that in Joe Biden's case also. Anyway, we will be watching.
But Shri, one of the important ones that you're talking about, coalition building is so important, right? Let's just talk about what he's done, and Ro's flaws aside, right? Every candidate has flaws, and one would think that every candidate has to improve. And as you see dissent in your district, policies evolve. You read the district, you read the issues that are at the forefront, you look at the demographics, you look at how these issues are. But one of the things that I think he's done well, to your point, whether he's a centrist or whether he's more of a progressive, I think you're absolutely right. He's straddled this position for himself that enables him to thrive. Just looking at the fact that he's only been a member of Congress for probably 7.5 to 8 years, he's authored 7 bills. And these bills have not been small, consequential bills like naming a post office. which Ro has done as well. He's named one of the post offices for a veteran who died in one of the wars. So from that regard, he focuses on the bread and butter issues of a district. But look at the CHIPS Act. Look at the Inflation Reduction Act. Look at the Veterans Bill that he co-authored into law with Kevin McCarthy, who's now the Speaker of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in the House of Congress. He's now doing a new bill on reinvigorating the websites in the United States government, really to come back in accessibility. So my point is, he understands how to take on issues. He understands how to take on bills. He understands how to forge coalitions. And one of the most successful things is it's okay to have rhetoric, but in the end, you have to have results. And those results are clearly proven in the direction that Ro has. And let me just leave you with this. During a moment in time when I talked about the US-India partnership and how important it is, as you know, during the war with Russia and Ukraine, United States was putting a lot of pressure on India to come back and take a position. India did not take a position on the Ukraine war and continued to say that we will do what's best for India's interest. And at that moment, there was an opportunity where there was a tremendous amount of frustration, at least perceived with India at that moment in time. But Ro, along with others, championed CAATSA, which was the waiver and the sanctions. Now that brought in a coalition of over 300 members of Congress, bipartisan. I think from that regard, Congressman Khanna did extremely well. He recognized that America's position in the world depends upon relationships and allyship, and one cannot ignore the growing role of India, not only to put a check on hegemony, the China hegemony, but also recognizing that in the new global South, India has a role. India is now forging a role even in Africa. It's securing its relationships along with Nepal and Sri Lanka. It's solidifying its position. So from that regard, CAATSA was historic in the sense that it brought Republicans and Democrats alike. And I believe that was Ro's greatest strength. Now, he's been criticized that he didn't vote for the final defense authorization bill. Well, it's consistent with his values. He's always been against endless wars. And he's also felt that the military-industrial complex in the United States spends an inordinate amount of money. And if you just, instead of an $800 billion budget, did 100 billion less, it could be used on a lot of the progressive issues and the middle of center issues that Ro and his generation of politicians are espousing for in American politics today.
Thank you, Yogi. And viewers, please like this video. I would like Yogi to come back again and again, and we continue this conversation because these tides are going to shift. In fact, I've omitted one main name there, Vivek Ramaswamy, in the slide deck, because we did a talk about Vivek Ramaswamy, Yogi and I, which was dedicated just to him. That was a previous hangout I had with Yogi. So those of you who want to go and watch his stand on Vivek Ramaswamy, I welcome you to go back and look at that video that's already on PGurus, about 10 days old. So let's move on to the next candidate, or next Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi. Now, Raja has identified himself as being Hindu. For that, he has received a lot of flack. In fact, some rabid elements have called death for Raja, and they still roam free. The freedom of speech in US is very interesting how it's getting applied. I'm not going to comment on that, but Raja may also mull a run for the Senate seat in Illinois. Your thoughts on what are his chances on that?
Raja Krishnamoorthi has forged a great political career for himself in Chicago. And yes, you're right. He's taken attacks on that as well. But certainly, a congressional member of Congress, their ascension in politics is aspirational. And in this context, I think Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi has done relatively well. He certainly has built great inroads into the Indian American community. One of his fundraising bases is one of the reasons why he's going to be so successful. And as a part of that, I think Raja Krishnamoorthi has positioned himself well for one of two things. One, I think he's going to have a coveted role in the Democratic Party by raising money, which he does well. Second, I think that his aspirations are running for the Illinois Senate. And while I think that the time is a little bit away, I think he's doing all the right things. He's had critics. You're right, he's been attacked. But certainly from that, I think what Raja Krishnamurthy has now done is be very clear about his aspirations. He got appointed to the Select Committee on China, and certainly he is positioning his political ascension by ensuring that he is also able to focus on the US-India partnership, and on that regard, also ensure that it puts a check on China's rise in the nation, which for America is probably a huge issue at the present. So he's carrying that well. But I think he's going to continue to attack for a while the past. I think you're going to see a little bit more of a guarded Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy focusing on the issues important for Chicago and Illinois, and then in his seat in Congress.
The next person, please. Pramila Jayapal.
Yeah.
I think she took the oath on Bhagavad Gita once, if I remember correctly. I'm not 100% sure of that. I don't know her religious affiliations today, but she has been a bit of a firebrand. She called Israel a racist country, for which even the Democratic Party has censored her. See, just the word that Israel is a racist country got so much reprimand from her own party mates. Yet India gets bashed day in and day out by the same individual. She wrote a letter expressing concern about the minorities of India. Heck, you couldn't be wronger than, in my personal opinion, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. I don't know who funds your interests. We know who funds your interests. That's a different matter. But the thing is, she wrote that letter, had 70 congressmen, mostly from them, I think all of them Democrat, signed and sent to President Joe Biden, and yet she was one of the people who was ushering Prime Minister Narendra Modi in. So this can all be politics. I don't have a problem with that. The thing about this is, how is it that we boast of so many Indian American congressmen, yet when there are specific India bashing statements, and sometimes even the Department of State takes this stand, Yogi, it's not just the fact that some politicians are doing it for politics.
No, that's a great point. But to understand Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, let's really understand where her political career began, right? She was a activist that focused on immigration rights, right?
Yogi, can you adjust your camera just a little bit, because your head is getting cut off? The other way. Yeah, perfect. Please continue.
Okay, so Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal started as an activist on immigration rights. That was first and foremost her passion. With then Congressman McDermott, she started a hate-free zone. That was a nonprofit that she started. So she was appealing to the progressive wing of this party, and she was really trying to mobilize a movement of people that really focused on issues around immigration, specifically the Dreamers. And Shri, as you know, the Dreamers in America are those people whose parents came to the United States illegally. They're children of them, and that was her passion. That's what she worked on. Subsequent to that, she started an organization called America First America, if it may be interchangeable. And through that, she began to really become a progressive organizer. So what's the word organizer? A word organizer is you rally people around a certain issue, you advocate, you come back and make fundamental change. And then when Congressman McDermott, who I believe was a great friend of India, member of the India caucus as well, and an ally and a champion, when he decided to retire, he decided to run as a member of Congress. So all politics is local. She's from a district of Bellevue and Seattle. Once again, the home of Amazon and the home of Microsoft, income inequality, where 95% of America feels they've been left behind, and 5% of America has been the beneficiary of all the wealth, and it's a profound problem. So if you look at her progressive values in her local district, she got her elected. Now, do you cater to the will of to the constituency that gets you elected, and then you carve your position in American politics, and in a house of 400 people, you want to be relevant. So you pick and choose the issues that you're going to be passionate about. He's representing the interest of the people that got her elected. Now, Shri, it's a narrow field for Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. If she ever aspires to run for the Senate in Washington State, or if she ever decides to run for the governor, that is going to be a challenge. So clearly she's forging her role in American politics by becoming the leading voice on progressive values, human rights, all of the other stuff. Now, when she does the things that she does, I've often wondered, why does she do what she does? My advice to all the candidates in the United States Congress, at least to them, is follow your foreign policy comments based upon what the White House and what the State Department says. Those will be safe territories to tread upon. And as you know, the United States State Department has been very, very pragmatic off late in their foreign policy positions. Even though they talk about a foreign policy grounded in strong human rights, they are now being very cautious about when they insert themselves and when they do not insert themselves. And that's really where I think is a safe ground for most of the candidates. Regarding Pramila Jayapal, she does believe in immigration. She believes strongly in that. And I think that's where we can find common ground. As Indian Americans living in this country, focused on America, not looking through the geopolitical prism of our origin of India, I believe she could be somebody that could champion some of the immigration issues, such as H-1Bs, green card backlogs, work with them on their passions, work with them on the issues that we can find common ground on. I don't even know what her faith is, to be honest with you. And neither should it be important to most Americans. It should be important to those of us in this country who choose to get involved in the political process, but it should be first their values, what they stand for. And it's a one nation under God in which we profess to follow any faith that we want. We should never make religion front and center. It should be the part of an identity, a persona, their belief. And are they good Hinduism or good people? And what defines their faith? What defines their legislation? But I think Pramila Jayapal will be a strong ally on immigration-related issues. And if we want to cut the backlog on green cards, we want to increase the cap on H-1Bs and EADs and our children then getting aged out. I think we will absolutely ensure that she becomes somebody who pays attention to this issue that's important to the Indian American community, and to that point, even the Hindu American community.
Thank you, sir. Next one, please. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry, did you want to say something more on Pramila? Because we are running a little behind. We have 20 minutes left, and we have a fair amount of people to look at. Perhaps you can talk 1 or 2 minutes about each one. Shri Thanedar is a relatively new commodity. He's recently got elected as congressman from the state of Michigan. And I think he authored one resolution in Congress, if I remember correctly. You know him more than I do. Just introduce him for our viewers.
Yes, Shri Thanedar is very intelligent, very smart, rags to riches. I think he personifies the story about how such an unassuming person can make it in American politics. His win was not easy. As you know, he was a state legislature in Michigan, did relatively well. When he ran for Congress, he had 8 African-American opponents in the race. He won. And now that he's come into Congress, he is trying to forge his identity. He's trying to build his base. He's somebody who is relatively unknown in the country, but I'll tell you, wherever Shri goes, he's making impact. He is very well thought through. He's also had successes. One of the interesting stories, Shri, he says that to come to the United States, his visa got rejected 5 times. And then the 6th time he got it. So immigration is very important to him. I think he also understands that in Michigan, his re-election is going to be based upon whether he can come back and influence or convince his voters that he deserves to go back into Congress the 2nd time. He also, along with Congressman Khanna, will be going to the delegation that's going to India, 10 members of Congress that are going to be visiting Mumbai and Hyderabad and Delhi right at time of the 15th of August celebrations. So Shri Thanedar is finding his course. He's trying to go to the people that are easy for him to relate to. And I think that if Shri Thanedar is able to win re-election, he's going to have a great future in American politics. But he's finding his bearings.
Thank you, sir. Let's go to the next candidate. Ami Bera. We know he has been a congressman for a while, but not much is known about him. You know him for a long time. Your thoughts. I think he calls himself an atheist. So he hasn't really identified himself with any Hindu issues thus far, as far as my memory serves me. So please go ahead.
Well, Congressman Bera, I believe, is a Unitarian Christian. And he represents the Elk Grove district, which for the members, many may know, it's near Sacramento. So Sacramento is an extremely complex district. It's not as Democrat as one would want. As you know, Central Valley happens to cusp on Democrats, Republicans. So it's a fragile district from which he's run for. The first election that he ran for re-election, it was a very close race. The recount went at least a couple of times. Second time when he ran, he had a lot of opposition from some people who believed that he was just focusing too much on US-India issues. He came under attack. And then he had a little bit of an issue regarding campaign contributions from somebody on his family. And since then, what I've noticed is that Congressman Ami Bera has been a reliable Democratic member of Congress. He serves on the Committee on Foreign Affairs, but he's been really focused specifically on those issues, effective with what he does specifically. But I've noticed that there's been a little bit of a pause from when he was a first-term member of Congress. And also he's, I believe, India-born as well. So his options of future could potentially be limited to either Congress or to some other offices down the road within the state of California.
Thank you so much. Is Ami born here in the US?
No, I think Ami was India-born.
Oh, okay.
Who came to the United States right around the time when I came to the United States, which I think was when I was 20 years old.
Okay. Next one, please. This is an interesting candidate, Sri Preston Kulkarni. I think his mom is American, Christian, I think I should say. Mom is Christian, dad is Hindu, and he ran as a Democratic candidate in Texas, which has turned red lately, and it was a very difficult, tough campaign. Talk to me a little bit about where he has all impeccable credentials, Harvard educated, very successful. He has worked in the United States Foreign Service. Where did his campaign go wrong, you think, Yogi?
I think Sri Kulkarni initially ran a great campaign the first time. Came short. In the second campaign, I think that he was running a good campaign. He had a money advantage. He had an organization that was working a great ground game. Somewhere along, I think he became a casualty where many believed that he was too strong of a Hindu. And when he was boxed in with that narrative, he tried to make amends. And then he got attacked from the other side for being less Hindu. So I think he became a casualty of that. And I think it's one of those fragile territories that most candidates are now having to straddle as they move forward, which really goes to the point. You really have to stick to the core issues that most Americans will vote on. While you can continue to believe in some of the initial people who fund your campaign to get you legitimacy, often enough, if you really start to focus on all the things that you want, it may actually end up being a very short-lived career. And Sri was one of those casualties, I believe. Had he been elected, I think he would have forged a great role. He had a great pedigree, great education. He understood politics. Subsequent to that, he did get an appointment in the administration, and now he's working on get out the vote efforts in the state of Texas with the desire to turn that from red to blue.
It used to be blue not so long ago, so this might come as a surprise to many of our viewers. It was blue for a long time. And Richards ruled the place like
some pockets of Texas are still blue, believe it or not. That's why Texas becomes so critical. And one of the issues is when you're running as a candidate in Texas, your policies are a little different, right? You have to focus. And sure, you're going to hear me say this a lot. All politics is local. If you don't focus on your local politics, it's going to bring you down. You can either focus on the issues, and I often give the example of Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, right? One of the most brilliant members of Congress that I knew. She's probably the best Hindu American member of Congress that she had, right? It was not uncommon for her to come on YouTube and Facebook and come back with her messages about issues that your Sanatanis would say, or for that matter, any Hindu American in this nation. But in the end, that was not the only reason. I think her trip to Syria and some of the other stuff that she did clearly put her in a box. And, unfortunately, she decided not to even run for re-election. It's sad. But unfortunately, they say that you reap what you sow.
Ritesh Tandon. For those of you who don't know, Ritesh is a very good friend of mine. In fact, he's practically my neighbor. He stays very close to where I live. And he has been running on the Republican ticket, but I think for 2024, he has switched parties. So he will be running against Khanna, most likely, in the Democratic primaries. As far as primaries go in the state of California, it's a unified primaries, meaning like the top two finishers, doesn't matter whether they are Democrat or Republican, the top two finishers will go and fight out for the position of the congressman or congresswoman. So a little bit about Ritesh Tandon. What do you think he needs to do to upset the apple cart, so to speak, and defeat Khanna?
I can tell you what he should not do, which is one of the reasons why, a lot of times a candidate has to make a case for why he's running, what he stands for, what are the issues, what are the priorities. I think his singular focus has been to defeat Roe because of whatever the reasons might be, for where many people in the community may feel that he doesn't stand for what they believe or what's important to them. I think that if you ask people, what does Ritesh Tandon stand for? I think, let's forget our community. If you look at the district, Fremont, Milpitas, Cupertino, portions of San Jose, and Sunnyvale, they'll come back and say, oh, this guy was put up because some people were upset at Roe. That's not ever a reason to get elected for Congress. Ritesh needs to define his message. He needs to define why he's running for Congress, the consequential issues that he wants to make. I think he could do a little better with his policy positions. I think his policy positions are not clear. He makes a great attempt. I think it's okay to read from a prepared script sometimes rather than going speaking extemporaneous. He hasn't shown his ability to do that. So I think he loses people beyond many of those who may have asked him to run.
Thank you, Yogi. And let's move on to Rishi Kumar. Rishi also has appeared on our channel, viewers. And if you want to look at what Rishi stands for, you can watch that video. And Yogi, your thoughts. Rishi is going up against a fellow Democrat, Anna Eshoo, 80 years old. She's been a veteran. She rode the coattails of, I would say, Nancy Pelosi, just like Zoe Lofgren and a few others. And now she's been winning consistently. Although last time Rishi got, I think, 41% of the vote. It was close. 59 to 41 is pretty close battle. Your thoughts on what Rishi needs to do?
I think Rishi was probably a great council member in Saratoga. He redefined Saratoga politics. The sense of engagement and activism is what endeared many people in Saratoga. And I think Rishi was able to forge a regional role. When he ran against Anna Eshoo, I think what he did is what most candidates struggle with. He went against the establishment, similar to how Roe went against the establishment as well when he ran against Congressman Mike Honda. Rishi works hard. Rishi is probably one of the hardest working people that I know. He's been trying to follow a playbook which ensures go deep into the community and resonate with the message. But unfortunately, I think Rishi has not been able to come to the point where other people in the party feel that his candidacy needs to get the support. Now, what Rishi has shown is that if you work hard and you go deep into the neighborhoods and knock on doors, you can make a persuasive case for why Congresswoman Anna Eshoo should retire and clear the way for a generation of politicians like Rishi Kumar. He did really well in the last election. The key is if it's a re-election one-on-one between him and Anna Eshoo, I think Rishi has a chance to probably run a credible campaign. The risk for Rishi will be, who else would jump into the race? If there are other people who jump into the race, name ID and other stuff will matter. In a crowded field of credible candidates, we'll see what it is. I've always liked Rishi. I think his heart's in the right place. I think he's hardworking. His messaging has become much more crisper, much more clear. And I think that if he were able to raise more money, I think he would do better. I think that we all get caught in the limitations of the base of people that support us. And often enough, you spend more time with them and you hope that that translates into either a financial win or a ground movement of people who will help you campaign in cities that you need to campaign in. So I wish him the best.
Thank you. And viewers, Rishi has been unequivocal in opposing SB 403. And he has said that in many official platforms. I wanted to mention that because Pramila Jayapal, I'm sure, supports it because one of her, I don't know if I can say that, proteges, minions, whatever you want to call, Kshama Sawant is the one who shepherded the caste discrimination law in the city of Seattle. So, Roke kind of again straddled it, is saying that he's against discrimination of any sort. Kamala Harris hasn't weighed in, Bera hasn't weighed in, and so on. I just wanted to tell that at least Rishi has taken a clear stance. Ritesh also has taken a very clear stance, no to SB 403. Let's move on to the next one, please. Amar Shergill. Very little is known about this person except that he is a very, very avowed Khalistani cause supporter. He has been threatening, allegedly, the California Assemblyman. Whoever says votes no to SB 403 is going to. There are some tweets you guys can read about it, and I don't know enough about this man to have an opinion one way or the other. I'm hoping Yogi, you will explain or expand on who Amar Shergill is. What does he stand for? I mean, it's what Khalistanis are doing is in many places is illegal. You can't set fire to a Indian government's property and then hope that somehow you'll melt away into the crowds. Go ahead, sir.
Well, Amar Shergill, I've gotten to know him in the Democratic Party. That's when I first met Amar. He was just like many of us, getting involved in the Democratic Party and forging a place where we could continue to get engaged. Amar over the years has been very active in his local community, which I don't even know where he lives, but I think he lives somewhere in Central Valley. And through that portion, he's forged his political future on issues such as Medicare for All, forging coalitions with organizations such as the California Nurses Association. I think there are issues that he cares deeply about, and he's now become a leader in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. He's taken on issues with the establishment, and the Progressive Caucus is probably one of the biggest caucuses in the California Democratic Party. He's often brought issues to the forefront that sometimes people question. What's the purpose of bringing those issues onto the California Democratic Party? He's obviously also from the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. I think he also believes in the multi-generational, multi-religious, pluralistic component of ensuring that everybody lives together, and that's what I think he believes in. Amar and I don't always agree on everything. But he's very, very active in the party, and the Progressive Caucus has a formidable influence in the California Democratic Party.
He's one of the main drivers of the SB 403. He's one of the main drivers of the SB 403.
He was he was, I think, in one of the press conferences that Senator Wahab, when she introduced the bill, and certainly the bill that was positioned and where the bill has come today, I think is a different bill. And I think that, you can advocate for a certain bill to come along. And I think the people who were going against SB 403 were able to clearly advocate for some concerns around selective enforcement and facial neutrality and equal protection. I think the other issue that I think came to the forefront was the CRD overreach, right? And I think that during this SB 403, there was a lot of conversation about this. So I think the bill now is a different bill than when it first got introduced. And I think that Amar, as you showed the picture, probably advocated for a form of SB 403. But I think that the bill is much different than when it was first introduced. And I think a lot more people, Shri, are aware of the CRD overreach concern. The Cisco lawsuit is often mentioned to a lot of people. And then I think, one of the biggest issues on the table right now is that if this bill were to pass, the overreach of the CRD. You probably I've heard a lot on your program about Sundar Iyer and Ramana. And I think, the lawsuit was eventually dismissed against Sundar. And, I think I heard on your program, and I think one of the Congress member, Khanna, also mentioned that he's an atheist. I've also gotten to hear from a lot of people that the top tier of his management team was Dalits as well. And, from that regard, there's a concern about the CRD overreach. I don't think that the opponents or the proponents of the bill, I think what they can find common ground on is that if this bill were to pass, how do we ensure the enforcement is going to protect a community? And I think the CRD overreach is front and center on everybody's mind. I think we can always find common ground with people, right? And address the issue that I think is problematic. And then the second issue is the portrayal of Hinduism in our textbooks, which is another concern that I've heard loud and clear from our community.
And this is the last candidate that we're going to talk about in today's session. We may add more candidates in our next hangout with Yogi. Viewers, this is the first time I think somebody has taken an attempt to understand and define all the candidates that are Indian American in origin and what they stand for. Harmeet Dhillon, not much is known to many people except that she ran for the chair of RNC, I think, and she lost out to Rennie. You can fill in the blanks. I've not been following that very closely.
Sure. Harmeet Dhillon's ascension in American politics on the Republican side has been pretty impressive. Political positions aside, much is not known about early Harmeet Dhillon, but she was on the board of ACLU at one time. Pretty compelling how that, but I think it really comes down to the civil liberties that she believes in. And I think that as her voice was running through the gamut of her political engagement, I think civil rights and human rights and all of those issues were profound issues that she pursued. She ran for assembly at one time, believe it or not, Shri, and while she did not win, she was able to forge a role starting with the California Democratic Party, Republican Party. And as you and I have often talked about government becoming a meritocracy, she was able to make the case to the Republicans that it is a time to bring more Indian Americans into the political process. She did bring more Indian Americans who were Republican leaning into the party. Subsequent to that, she became somebody who went to radio programs, TV programs. She was frequent on Fox News, guest of Tucker Carlson, and many of the other programs. And then subsequent to that, she became somebody who really began to defend the Republican Party positions. And then she became a select committee on the Republican National Committee. While I don't always agree with her positions, one has to admire the tenacity by which she's been able to propel herself to the highest level of a party and debate and dialogue. And then also, Shri, many of your listeners or viewers may not be aware of this, but she defended President Trump on a couple of lawsuits and had successes. She's now, a huge voice in the Republican Party. She ran for the Republican Party chairperson role. Unfortunately, she didn't win, but she got a lot of support. And clearly, I think she has a pivotal seat at a table in the Republican Party where she is ensuring that the viewpoint of Indian American Republicans is put front and center on issues that I think matter to the Republican Party at the present moment in time.
Thank you so much, Yogi. And viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And we will leave you with this one parting video that we played at the beginning. We're going to play it again and see you all very soon. Namaskar.